Shalom. Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome back to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic, the only ministry of its kind that looks at the truth of the scriptures in terms of the Septuagint, the Masoretic, looking at them side by side, chapter by chapter, from Genesis to the end of the prophets. We're going to look today at Deuteronomy 31. There are a total of 30 verses. Verse 3 says here, who goes before you, versus he will go over before you. So this is a descriptor of what he does, what Yah does, part of his character, versus this is what he will do. Verse 5. We're going to ignore that one. Verse 6. That advances in the midst of you. Neither will he by any means forsake you, nor desert you. Versus that does go with you. He will not fail you nor forsake you. So the difference here is that he's in the midst of them and he is advancing with them. It's another thing to forsake and desert somebody versus to fail them and forsake them. Verse 7, continuous difference of be courageous and strong, which is a Hebrewism, versus be strong and of good courage. So this is a statement that is repeated in the book of Joshua. We're going to see that later on. And it essentially means be a man in our modern vernacular. Be brave. Your fathers versus their fathers. Verse 8, continuous difference of abandon versus forsake. Afraid versus dismayed. So one is to be fearful, obviously, and the other one is to be discouraged, to lose enthusiasm or be upset. Verse 9, significant difference is that Moses wrote the words of this law in a book versus he wrote this law. So the difference is it is more specific as to the words themselves being written in a book, and it doesn't say a scroll, but it's in a book. Perhaps it was an ancient book, which is a scroll, in the form of a scroll, but it is more specific as to that these words. The words of this law were written in a book by Moses. Not just that he wrote this law, it doesn't say where. Verse 10, after 7 years, in the time of the year of release, versus at the end of every 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release. So the difference is that it adds solemnity, and this is talking about the Jubilee, the year of release. Verse 12, learn to fear versus learn and fear. So one is simply, one is simply one action, learn to fear, and the other is two separate actions, learn and fear. Verse 14, we see a different, I'm going to say drastic tonal difference here. In 14, it says, the days of your death are at hand. So it's Yah informing Moses, your death is soon, versus your days approach that you must die. Just a different tone. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Significant difference here as well. Stand you by the doors versus present yourselves in the tabernacle. So the significant difference continues here. Is it says, and stood by the doors of the tabernacle of testimony, versus they presented themselves in the tabernacle. So they went inside the tabernacle. Verse 15 further proves the Septuagint was correct, or is correct, because it says, and Yah descended in a cloud and stood by the doors of the tabernacle, not inside. He's meeting them where they are. And the pillar of the cloud stood by the doors of the tabernacle of testimony. The Masoretic further shows that the Septuagint is speaking rightly, or is written correctly. Yah appeared in the tabernacle in a pillar of the cloud. Okay, it says in the tabernacle. Okay, so there's the difference there. It's just cementing that it's going with this narrative that they're in the tabernacle, not by the doors. And the pillar of the cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. So is it in or outside of the tabernacle? Verse 16, strange gods versus Elohim of the strangers. So it's describing that these are foreign Elohim, these are the false Elohim, versus they are the Elohim of the strangers. It could be the right one. We don't know. But they're the Elohim of the strangers. But it seems to be implying that, no, these are different Elohim, because they're of the strangers, not the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it says here, which they are entering, versus whether they go to be among them. So they're simply going in the land, in the Septuagint, versus they are going in the land in order to mingle with the strangers. So that's their purpose, to go whoring after a strange Elohim. No, that's not what is being implied in the Septuagint. Verse 17, and I will be very angry with them, versus my anger shall be kindled. I will leave them and turn my face away from them, versus I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them. So these are just different terminology being used. Verse 18, strange Elohim versus other Elohim. Verse 19, the words of this song versus this song. So this is talking about lyrics versus these could be notes or lyrics. It is open to interpretation. And then among the children of Israel to their face. So this song may be a witness for me. Versus this song may be a witness for me against them. So we can see again a tonal difference. One is more kind, just being factual, versus a more stern, mean tone. Verse 20, satisfy, versus wax and fat. Doesn't mean you have to be fat, simply you're satisfied. Verse 21, an addition of "and it shall come to pass when many evils and troubles are befallen them." And then we see here, for I know their wickedness versus their imagination. One is less flattering, which is wickedness. And one is more flattering, just saying, oh, it's their imagination. I know what they are doing here this day, versus which they go about even now. Verse 23, which Yah swore to them, and he shall be with you, versus which I swore to them, and I will be with you. So this is a pretty big difference. I'm going to say it's a big difference. The reason why is because in the Septuagint, it is stating that the one who is swearing is Yah, and Yah will be with them. Versus in the Masoretic, Moses is the one swearing, and Moses is saying, I will be with you, Joshua. Doesn't make any sense. Why would he be in the land? Because we know that he died, and doesn't make any sense that he will be with them. So it's not Moses speaking, it is Yah speaking. And verse 26, take the book, and it shall be there among you for a testimony. Versus that it may be there for a witness against you. Again, it seems to be continual tonal difference, that it is just simply being more factual in the Septuagint versus being more harsh in tone in the Masoretic. The word provocation is used. Provocation in verse 27 versus rebellion. You have been provoking in your conduct toward Elohim. How shall you not also be so after my death? Versus you have been rebellious against Yah. How much more after my death? So we can see. In the Septuagint, it is more realistic. It's just being factual. It's based on their past behavior, their past history, versus almost being exaggerated and having a low opinion of them, that they're just, they're always rebelling. And that's not always the case. Yeah, they have provoked him. They've been impulsive and complained and so on. But there seems to be a low opinion of the children of Israel, that Moses has a low opinion of them in the Masoretic. Then we can see in verse 28, heaven and earth to witness against them versus to record against them. Verse 29, transgress versus corrupt. And then evils versus evil. Okay, so that's all for this video, for this chapter. Tune in next time for Deuteronomy 32. We'll look at that next, and thank you very much for your time. May God bless you and make your way prosperous. Until next time, Shalom and Maranatha.